you do human potential astrology in your literature. That stood out to me.
Yeah.
What is it? How does it differ from traditional astrology? I never really heard the term human potential astrology.
Yeah, it's kind of my own way of well, the thing is, I'm into the whole human potential movement, and the two modalities that I'm really into is astrology as well as using nutrition as a modality to achieve your human potential. Now, there's also other modalities like yoga and martial arts and things like that, but using astrology as a human potential consultant has to do with when I work with clients, when I work with them one-on-one, I look at the chart to understand their potentials, their success potentials, the potential negative traits, and I address them, and I do the reading in a way to help them to understand it and understand how to work with it and understand, okay, well, when you're in your shadow more, these are the expressions of your astrology chart that are going to manifest themselves. The more you are in your power, the more that you are channeling your higher self more and you're embodying your soul more, the more you're gonna bring out a more positive expression of these astrological configurations. Now, I also believe there's a little bit of fate. I believe that in past lives, if you had some karmic stuff from past lives, in this lifetime you might have to deal with it. So there's some things that I think are already perhaps written in stone, but at the same time we still have a lot of free will. And the way I look at it, it's a mathematical equation, kind of. It's your free will projection. So all the time we're projecting our free will, plus whatever the current astrological configuration is, equals manifestation. Right? So as a human potential consultant, I help my clients understand that. Okay, so for example, if I'm talking to a client, let's say they're getting a Saturn transit for the next year, like Saturn's affecting them, right? Just generally speaking. Generally, Saturn has to do with being more disciplined, being more focused, responsibilities. And in traditional astrology, they used to look at Saturn. In those days, they used to look at everything as like, Saturn was negative, Jupiter was positive, and whatever. And in those days, if you're getting like a heavy Saturn transit, the ancient astrologers would like almost feel sorry for you. They'd be like, oh, too bad, In modern times and in the emerging Aquarian age and in the emergence of free will thinking and free will astrology, we're looking at it differently. So if you're getting a Saturn transit, it's really up to your free will how you want to utilize that. You can utilize that Saturn transit to become more disciplined, become more responsible, get a lot of stuff done. Or you can use it, or if you're not being responsible, Saturn's going to teach you those hard lessons. Saturn's going to teach you those karmic lessons and force you to be responsible. And, for some people, it might mean like they might have to deal with like a lawsuit or something, or they might accidentally, get someone pregnant or whatever, and it forces them to be responsible, right? And so that's just one example of how we utilize it. And astrology actually went through a huge renaissance in the last 100 years, Western astrology has, because it didn't make sense before, like for people that were into spiritual transformation, and for people who understood that, people that were really into, basically this guy Dane Rudyard came into the astrology scene, and this guy was a brilliant philosopher, and he studied a lot of Eastern mysticism, and when he finally got to astrology, it didn't make sense to him until the mainstream astrological approach did not make sense to a guy like that and to other people like him, until he came across some other work, and then he kind of renovated astrology. But for his first, 30 years when he started writing books and articles, nobody really understood him. All the astrologers thought he was out to lunch. And then it wasn't until the 60s when that whole new awakening happening and like Woodstock and the hippie movement and the protesting Vietnam and the whole the emergence that happened in the 60s, those people started embracing this new approach to astrology. And here we are today, 40 years later, or almost 40 years later, and we've developed that approach in the Western world. So that kind of, I don't know, we kind of went all over the place there. But
No, very, very fascinating. Now, there are obviously different branches of astrology. There's Vedicals, different types. How did you get to the area that you're in? Why were you attracted to it?
I was always kind of drawn to astrology whenever I used to even see it in the newspaper, like your horoscopes and stuff like that. And I never dismissed it or anything like that. But it wasn't until I started having my own spiritual awakening and transformation back in 2006 when I started looking at it more. I started looking at charts, and then a little bit after that, I had my first astrology reading done by a guy he's been an astrologer for 30 years. And he looked at my chart and he's like, dude, I gotta start teaching you astrology, right? And so he started teaching me the basics. He kind of, got me going, gave me that push. And then I started learning on my own, started doing my own research. A lot of it felt familiar. I believe that I've done this in a past life or many past lives. I just went through what they call a recapitulation process, when you remember like what your soul already knows from previous lifetimes. And that's pretty much what I went through. And also now we have to deal with, astrology is always evolving as well. So now we have to now we have Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. We're always discovering new heavenly bodies, and Western astrology is very progressive. It always integrates these new discoveries into it. But yeah, so that's pretty much how I got started in this lifetime. And I feel that my approach to it, and not only to how I read charts, but what I am to share with people in this lifetime, has to do with making people understand that astrology is the science, and it's the most ancient science, and it's the mathematics of how everything works. And I think part of my purpose is to help teach that to people, and help people understand that, astrology needs to be integrated into society. Like right now we look at astrologers as fortune tellers. We're moving away from that. We are, but still there's that, astrologers are fortune tellers or psychics or whatever. And we're moving into a time where, as astrology becomes more integrated into society, we're going to have more specialized astrologers. Right now, an astrologer is a jack of all trades, right? So I'm doing, mostly what I do is I work with people one-on-one as like a life coach, a human potential consultant. But another area that I like is using astrology strategically. So like with business, when businesses want to start a business, you can pick a time for them to incorporate, or when they want to plan their like marketing campaign or whatever. And these are strategic applications. Now, there's so many other applications. These are the things I like to focus on. And another area that I'm going to get into is using it for health and nutrition. That's something that I'm getting into. But, then we can also have people who are relationship counselors and use astrology. A lot of astrologers do that. They work with relationships. But what happens when you get people who've been studying relationship counseling their whole life, and that's their focus, relationship counseling, and then you bring astrology into the equation? It's a whole other world, right?
Like
it takes it to the next level.
You have an edge. You have the general practitioner, and then you have the eye, ear, nose, heart, etc. So you're telling me, and that makes sense, that down the line with astrology, people are going to get into different specialties.
Specialties, yeah. And you can use astrology to plant your tomatoes. You can use astrology to relationship counseling. You can use astrology to plan for trading stocks. You can use astrology for doing intentional ceremonies and rituals. You can use astrology for so many things. Like I use astrology now in modern times. See, in past lives, it used to take us hours to draw a chart because we didn't have technology, right? Now, and even before calculators, I used to take forever. Now I can just pull up on my iPhone. I can pull up charts instantly. So let's say I'm traveling. Let's say I arrive somewhere for the first time. As soon as I step foot on that land, I pull up the astrology chart, and that astrology chart tells me what my experience is going to be like there, because that astrology chart is the astrological imprint into that experience. It's like the first time I meet you or I meet anybody, you can pull up the astrology chart at that moment, and that astrology chart will give you an idea of what that interaction is going to be like. Right? So when you understand on that level, I'm really hardcore into this. When I meet people that I think might be significant for my path, I always mark down the time because then you understand, right? And then sometimes you'll be like, okay, this relationship is a write-off. Maybe it's a cool relationship to talk to people. Like you might meet somebody and you'll be like, okay, this person is a good person to hang out with or whatever. But in terms of doing anything with that person, let's say, with business or any projects you want to work on, you'll be like, no, this person's a write-off, doesn't hold any weight because the way the moon was at that time, right? So, and I think with technologies, we're learning to embrace with technology now, we're learning to embrace all these different applications because it's so easy now.
When somebody has a consultation with you, have you found, because you can cover so many subjects, are there any specific areas or questions that keep coming up that people want to know? Or is it pretty much across the board?
It's always personal. Like you're talking about general questions about what's happening with the world.
Yes.
It's usually personal, but lately what's been a big topic for me that the information that I've been sharing with people on Facebook, I've been talking about the current Uranus-Pluto square. This is a big thing that's happening right now. We should probably talk about it. And what it means for the global political structures, global economic structures, because this is huge. Uranus and Pluto, basically like every two planets create a cycle with each other. It's kind of like the new moon, the full moon, like the moon cycle. The moon cycle is based on the sun and the moon and our relationship to it, right? So any two planets create cycles with each other. So whenever those two planets meet at the same place in the zodiac, so for example, when these two planets, Mercury and Venus, when they meet, that's the beginning of a Mercury-Venus cycle. Right? And then Mercury moves faster than Venus, and then as Mercury progresses, Mercury's kind of like the moon, right? And then Mercury will meet Venus again. So you can do that with any two planets. And I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible because I know I'm talking fast and it's a lot of information. But in the 60s, that's when we saw Uranus-Pluto alignment, right? And those two planets are some of the most powerful revolutionary combinations of energies, right? So Uranus is very revolutionary. Uranus rules the new age. And all those planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are still recent discoveries. And they have a direct relationship with the transformation of humanity, the evolution of consciousness. Those planets are directly related to that. Now, Uranus and Pluto had an alignment in the 60s. So that was like the beginning of this current Uranus-Pluto cycle, which is roughly 160-year cycle, 150-year cycle roughly. So we started that in the 60s. Now we're in the next phase of that cycle. So the 60s was like the new moon. Now we're in like the first quarter moon. And then there's the full moon and the last quarter moon. Those are the four major cardinal points. So what happened in the 60s, whatever was seeded then, like the intentions that people had, like we're going to start this new wave, the Aquarian age, and the song The Age of Aquarius came out, and people, and Woodstock and all that, like all those intentions that were seeded then, now we're starting to see them, come into action. And now actually, we have more power to actually take those ideas forward. And with the internet and with all these different things with social media and with, people have more power now. And that's why you're seeing like all these protests in all these every country, Ukraine, Egypt, Greece, everywhere, right? And it's going to continue for the next 2 years, 2.5 years, 2 to 2.5 years. We're going to see this energy. Now, why is this important? It's important because Pluto is in Capricorn, and Capricorn rules economic structures, political structures, and every time Pluto goes into Capricorn, which is every 250 years roughly, 258 years, we see a transformation in, Pluto rules transformation, we see a transformation in global economic, social, political structures. So the last time Pluto was in Capricorn was when the United States became a country. So for the next 250-year orbit of Pluto, it was established that United States would be like the main authority, the main, leading country of the world kind of thing, right? The ruler of the world kind of. Now we're experiencing another round of Pluto and Capricorn with this other, I'm not going to get into it, but with all these other things that are going on astrologically. And that's why you're starting to see all these uprisings and protests, and you always hear within the conspiracy community talking about they want to implement a world government, new world order. Well, they're trying to do this, they're trying to do it during Pluto and Capricorn because that's the time to do it, right? But we're also creating our own new world order too. Like the people we're creating our own, new economic structure. And what I wanted to get into, I don't know if you ever heard about it. It's a new currency called Bitcoin. Have you heard of it?
Nope.
It's a cryptocurrency. It's totally anonymous. It has nothing to do with the banks. It's decentralized. It's kind of hard to explain, but there's lots of information on YouTube about it. But it's a digital currency, and people love it because the banks, it's not a fiat currency. It doesn't inflate. No one owns it. No one controls it, and it keeps going up in value. Now, as an astrologer, when I look at what's happening with the world, with the Pluto and Capricorn and Uranus and Aries and some of the other things that are happening right now, and when I see something like Bitcoin, it looks like this is something that can honestly like dethrone the elite, right? So, and if it doesn't, it's going to lead to something else that will. Right? Because Pluto and Capricorn rules money and how we trade money and exchange, global exchange. And Pluto's like the planet of alchemy. It transforms wherever it goes. So the Bitcoin is a manifestation of it, or whatever it's going to lead to. Maybe it'll lead to something else. And I also looked at the Bitcoin chart too, and I can actually see it, how it's playing out in the Bitcoin chart. So it really depends on how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole. But that's one of the main things that people have been talking about right now. It's this revolution that's happening, this uprising, and a lot of people who are into like 2012 in the Mayan calendar, and I'm one of those people. A lot of people thought that on 2012 we were going to be enlightened and we're going to be in the fifth dimension, and I thought that maybe 7 years ago, but then 3 years ago I kind of thought that was a little unrealistic, and then and that even motivated me even further to just never mind what some people are saying. Astrology is very real. I'm a Taurus, and I like to look at what's real, right? And this is something that's been used for thousands of years. This is not like, I believe in channelers, I believe in psychics, and there's good ones and there's bad ones. But when you're working with something like astrology, you can measure everything because there's cycles. You can measure. So like I talked about that Uranus-Pluto cycle, that thing that happened in the 60s. You can measure that. So in 30 to 40 years from now, we're going to reach the peak of that cycle. So this utopian society that everyone's trying to create, we're probably going to see it in 30 to 40 years because when you measure the whole cycle, like that's what astrology does. You can gauge time. It's a measurement of time, right? So that's why I like to use it and yeah.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Because, you're knowledgeable in so many different areas, and you're interested in so many different areas. Reincarnation is an area that a lot of people out there are fascinated with, as myself is.
Yeah.
Now, I have this question for you, only because you're also involved in astrology. Now, when people talk about karma and reincarnation coming back, some people say you choose who you're going to come back as and everything else like that. I want to know if you believe it. And there's a second part to that, only because you're an astrologer, and astrology has such importance with people. Do you also choose the date or time or place you're going to be reincarnated, or there's no correlation?
This is,
because of what you
yeah. That's a really good question, and I often think about that, right? And there's different theories, and the universe is a big mystery, and we don't really know exactly how it works, but it works something like that. It has to, right? Like, when you die, who knows? Like maybe your physical incarnation doesn't choose when you're going to come back, but your soul, like when you die and your soul goes back to the light, right? When you reach the light, there's maybe some kind of council or something that decides, okay, you're going to be born at this time, or maybe it's just, who knows? It's beyond our 3D comprehension to even guess how that works, right? But astrology is a 3D tool that helps us to kind of measure that. And I actually used to have, one of the guys who actually first started teaching me astrology was really obsessed with reincarnation. And he wanted to study, like, for example, have you ever heard of Ian Stevenson?
No.
Ian Stevenson was a guy who studied reincarnation, and he studied like hundreds, or he had thousands of cases of kids that would, when they're born, like when they're young, they remember their past lives. And he would trace it back. Like if they remember their lifetime, then he would go back in history and find out who that kid was. And he did a lot of work around that. I haven't personally studied it, so I can't go too far into it, but I know about it. And one of my early astrological mentors wanted to, work with him. And he died actually a few years ago, but wanted to contact him and add the astrology equation and look at, okay, let's look at these guys' astrology charts. Look at the astrology chart in the past life and this lifetime, and what are the correlations. And I don't know if you know about, David Wilcock. He believes he was Edgar Cayce in a past life, and I actually haven't really looked at it. I saw it briefly, but his astrology chart and Edgar Cayce's astrology chart, they have a lot of planets in the same signs. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but they do look alike, and there is some, maybe they are. I'm in no position to make that decision, but yeah.
Now, question. We talk about astrology. We'll get back to it. But also, you're an alchemist. Okay, now when we say the word alchemist, what conjures up in most people's mind is from ancient times, magicians who turn base metals into gold. How do you use it today?
Okay, so now some people think that's a metaphor, turning metal into gold. Some people think it's literal. I use it more as a metaphor in my work. And now when I work as an astrologer, when I work with people one-on-one, as a coach, as a human potential consultant, I'm assisting them with information to help them in their own alchemical purpose. Because I believe that we're transmuting ourselves from lead into gold. Right? And that's what we're here for. We're doing it individually, and the planet is doing it collectively. And that's how I work with it. And then another application of alchemy is I'm really into like superfood nutrition and tonic herbalism. So I'm into like nutritional alchemy, and sometimes people are attracted to me and attracted to my work because they're seeking personal transformations through nutrition, which is not for everybody. But some people, like when I started changing my diet and I started eating more superfoods and mineralizing, and for a while I did all raw for a while, it helped me big time in my spiritual transformation. It helped me tune in and feel the spiritual realms more. I became more psychic. I became more advanced in my spiritual understanding. And because I have a lot of earth and food, I have a lot of earth in my astrology chart, and that's how food will affect me more like that. For other people, it might be yoga, might be the catalyst, right? So I use alchemy like that as well. So, for example, if somebody wants to use diet to help them reach a higher potential in their life, spiritually, physically, mentally, I can work with them so that's an application of alchemy. Another thing I want to point out is that in my experience, I used to formulate different herbal products and superfood products, which is application of alchemy. And what I find is alchemy really is my formula for alchemy is your projection. So we talked about free will projection. Whatever you're projecting, like let's say you want to create something. Let's say you want to create a certain kind of art, or in my case, I was formulating like superfood formulas, right? I wanted that formula to have a certain effect. So my projection would be like, okay, I want to create something that does this to people. And then as I'm projecting that, I let go and I let my intuition guide me, right? So when you project something, your intuition will respond and guide you to. So that's even could be an application of alchemy. But generally, yeah, it's transmuting the base metals into gold, which is a metaphor. And we are like lead. We're these earthbound humans that are excessively domesticated. We have a lot of toxins. We have a lot of traumas we've accumulated, and we're learning how to be in this world. We're learning how to become these fully enlightened spiritual beings, and that's the process of transmuting from base metals into gold.
Okay, when it comes to nutrition and all of that, what's the motivation or what's the roadway that you decide you should have this food or that food? Do you do it with astrology? Is it psychic? Is it intuitive? Is it a combination?
I basically, the way I work is I went through a process, and a lot of it's based on what I went through and my own experience. And one of the things I honestly believe, even with my astrology work, any of my consulting work, I believe that the people who are going to be drawn to me and my style, there's a reason for it. If they're coming to me, my approach to food is going to work for them. If they're not drawn to my style, then they're going to be drawn to another nutritionist or whatever. And, that person's style is going to be more appropriate for them, hopefully. If they're not that intuitive, then maybe not, right? So there's that one understanding. So people that are come to me are probably going to be drawn to some of the way I did it with diet. Now, another thing too is what I think is very important is that people, what I try to do is when I coach people with, let's say, food or give them a plan and work with them, depending on that's an alchemical process, right? And every time people have a lot of toxic energy in their body. And when you put like something good and something more pure in, the more they detoxify, it's kind of like if you have a color that's really dirty. It's like I used to be a color matcher. I used to formulate colors for a printing company, and that's actually where I got my Alchemy 101 indirectly. That was like the universe positioned me like that. Now let's say you have a color, right, like a yellow or purple, or not yellow, but like a purple or blue. When you add a little bit of black in it, it becomes dirty, right? And that's how we are. We have a little bit of black in us, and we got to wash out the black. Right, so that's where when you put more cleaner food into your body, that's what you're doing. You're cleaning out the black. Now, my whole approach is that my step one with people is if most people already are eating really bad, sometimes they're eating a lot of fast food. I just got off the phone with somebody on my way here who wants me to work with them, and step one is to cut out like the really bad things. And then the next step is, okay, start eating more organic, and then depends where they're at, right? The point is my style is I try to get them on specific superfoods and herbs right from the beginning that'll help rewire their brain, help recalibrate the body. And then from there they can take bigger steps. And the thing is I don't use astrology yet for nutrition. When I consult with people, I do look at their chart for nutrition, but it's because my approach to nutrition is so futuristic and new agey that not enough people have come together to really figure it out, like how to use astrology for that approach to nutrition. And that's something that I am like slowly I'm taking notes, I'm working with people, and over a period of time, I'm hoping that I will come to terms with that. Now, the thing is, the point is we want to get to a point where we cleanse, and the more we cleanse and the more we detoxify, the more we become tuned into our bodies. And once you become more tuned into your body, then you'll know what you should be eating. Like some people, there's some people that can do all vegan and all raw, and that's fine for them. Or maybe they should only do it for a period. And some people need meat, and some people need, some little bit of animal foods, and some people need a little bit of cooked food. And so then I work within a certain spectrum of foods. Mm-hmm. And, there's certain things that I cut out. Like you can't eat this, can't eat that, can't eat that. But there's all these things you can eat, and then within that spectrum, what are you going to work with, right? If you're taking a more yogic approach to life, then you want to eat lighter, less animal foods. If your approach to life is more physical, you do more physical work and stuff like that, you want to eat more animal foods or a little bit heavier foods because your energy needs to be more dense because you're mm-hmm. working with density more. So, we can go all over the place with this conversation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great.